Lovely to have you back. Hails originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Has been living in Florence for over 20 years, over 30 years. Wow. An alumnus of the famous Syracuse program here in Florence, and has become a real legend of the local scene, art historian extraordinaire, sometimes guide to the very privileged, and a very welcome guest lecturer here at the British Institute of France.
Thank you.
Over to you, Elaine. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, can you hear me like this? Good. How's it sound? All right. Thank you so much for that nice introduction, Simon. Thank you for inviting me. It's a real privilege to come to the British Institute. And a happy Valentine's Day to everybody in the audience and to those who are coming in on Zoom. I see lots of longtime friends, and I appreciate and thank you, Lynn, for donating this program. So well, I thought because of the day, Happy Valentine's Day, that we might take a look at images of love in Renaissance art. And just look at how beautiful that image is. And of course, when we think about love in Renaissance art, what comes to mind immediately is romantic love. And I'm hard-pressed to find a more beautiful image than this, which is by the artist named Francesco Hayez, who was painting in the mid-19th century. And this is known in Italian as Il Bacio, or The Kiss. And it is, of course, up at the Brera Museum in Milan. And if you've not been there, it's fabulous. Yes, so romantic love is what comes to mind immediately when we talk about images of love, but there are as many kinds of love as varied pictures of love. And I sat down this week and wrote down the kind of categories that I thought you might find interesting. We have Platonic love, unrequited love, love in mythology, love and marriage, familial love, erotic love, and of course, love that is for sale. And I'm sure I'm missing many other types of love, but that's what we're going to do tonight. And I thought it would be fun, especially in honor of Valentine's Day, to pair these different types of love with famous and sometimes not so famous images and, you know, dig down and look at the symbolism and have some fun with this. So we will turn first to our first category, which is, of course, Platonic love. And the definition of Platonic love comes from, not a surprise, Plato. Plato indicates it's a kind of love without sex. It implies a spiritual ideal love. And after all, because we're in Florence, I thought it was appropriate to talk about one of the greatest Platonic loves in history, Dante and Beatrice. And Dante and Beatrice were just across the river here from this wonderful 19th century painting, where you can see Dante, of course, was a Florentine, Dante Alighieri, as was his great muse, whose name was Beatrice. Beatrice was actually also a Florentine. She was from the Portinari family. And they actually met each other only twice. And there was something like 7 years in between those meetings. And Dante, this is the image that shows you Dante seeing Beatrice walking along the river. She's walking along with her lady friend who's wearing red. And both Dante and Beatrice were married at this time. So therefore, it was a courtly Platonic love. But of course, what Beatrice does is makes Dante a better person. She's the one who's going to accompany Dante through part of purgatory and all the way up to heaven, giving her an ideal. So we have Florentines here. So I think appropriately, I wanted to show you a Florentine picture. So bringing the idea of Platonic love between Dante and Beatrice to a more familiar artist, especially a Florentine artist, named Sandro Botticelli. And this is a little sketch that Botticelli does right at the end of his career. Now, we all know Botticelli. We're used to him with mythological stories, melancholic faces of Madonnas looking out at us in round frames, gods and goddesses. Well, what happens with Botticelli is he gets involved with a fanatical monk named Savonarola, And he's never going to paint any of those mythological images again. He becomes very spiritual, and at the end of his career, he takes on this amazing project where he wants to illustrate the Divine Comedy. And his idea was to do an illustration for all 100 cantos. Can you imagine? Now, 4 of them were done and colored, and then another 92 were sketched. And I'm showing you this image of Dante and Beatrice, which is, undeniably Botticelli. Look at the image of Beatrice, that beautiful linear line, the kind of lyrical line that moves her around, pointing up. And I think it's interesting as well, because now Beatrice is shown above Dante, clearly as his, not just muse, but his guide to take him through. And this is the quintessential, I think, Platonic love. These drawings were done on silver point. All right, now let's stay with Platonic love. Do y'all recognize this? So we're staying with Botticelli again. And when you think of Platonic love, that's such a beautiful painting, isn't it? It's a painting of Simonetta Vespucci. And Platonic love surrounds the idea of Simonetta Vespucci. And once again, Botticelli is the painter for this really exquisite work of art, as you can see. Who was Simonetta Vespucci? She was the wife of Marco Vespucci. She was actually from Genova. And Marco Vespucci would have been the cousin of Amerigo Vespucci. And for the Americans in the group, we know how important that is. She was known in her day as the greatest beauty in Florence. And even though she was a married woman, she was popular at the Florentine court. And she became the muse for Botticelli. Now look at her image. And of course, looks like the same woman, wouldn't you say? Yeah. Botticelli loves these almond-shaped eyes, this linear nose, this beautiful Cupid-like mouth. Love the way her eyes are so golden. And not only was Botticelli enchanted by Simonetta Vespucci, but of course she came to the mind of Giuliano and Lorenzo. Watch my cursor. So Giuliano and Lorenzo, these are the Medici family. This is the brothers who were running the show in Florence, and they were very, very popular. And Lorenzo was so enamored of Simonetta Vespucci, he actually gave her his palace for her to have her wedding, and the reception was held at his villa in Poggiai Caiano. Then Giuliano, just like his older brother, loved her platonically as well. He was crazy about her, so much so that he carried a banner with her image on it during this very famous joust in 1475. And again, it was all Platonic because after all, she was married. And unfortunately, she dies in 1476 at the age of 22. Which is young to say the least, and her body was carried through the city of Florence in an open casket so that all the Florentines had the opportunity to see the beautiful face of the young Simonetta. And then, I guess ironically, exactly 2 years later, Giuliano, her Platonic lover, is going to be murdered in the Pazzi conspiracy in 1478. So I like to pair Simonetta Vespucci to this golden age of Florence, because right after the death of Giuliano, 1478, we start to see a decline to 1492. We know what happens with that. The Medici will get kicked out of the city. So here we are at this magical moment of Platonic love that also reflects this golden age of Florence. I had a lot of fun figuring out images for Platonic love, and I came up with this one. I hope you recognize it. It's known as sacred and profane love, and this is at the Villa Borghese in Rome. One of Titian's most famous works. It's a rather early work by Titian, 1514, and it's a little bit of a different riff on Platonic love because it's sacred and profane. So which one is sacred and which one is profane? Okay, so we break it down. It was done at the beginning of Titian's career. What's the function of the work of art? No doubt this was painted for a piece of furniture or perhaps the front of a hope chest, which I'm going to get to because of the unusual shape. And the meaning behind this work of art has been interpreted in many, many different ways, from everything of making a choice to the easy way or the more difficult way, to an illustration of the hip neurotomachia polyphily. Now, how many of you in this room have ever heard of the hip neurotica polyphily? No? Never mind. It's all about a kind of journey of love. Well, we'll leave that for Erwin Panofsky to go through. But instead, what we see here, I think clearly, are two lovely ladies who are the same ladies. One is dressed and one is nude. And in the middle, you can see Cupid, who represents love, stirring water, which is a metaphor for stirring the beginnings of love. I mean, what a perfect wedding gift this would be. And if you look carefully, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to try it out. Yeah, there you go. That worked? Yeah, good. Okay, so see right here at the bottom of this plate, of this little silver or pewter plate, I know you can just barely see it, but there is a coat of arms of the Buonarroti family. And then right here where my cursor is, see, there's kind of a snake that runs here. This is the coat of arms of the Aurelio family. And therefore, we think it was to celebrate this marriage between Aurelio and the Buonarroti family. That makes sense as well. But now I'm going to ask you, which one is sacred and which one is profane? Yeah, interesting. So we think, all right, I think, of course, the sacred would be the woman who's all dressed. After all, she's covering up her nudity. She's wearing this beautiful drapery. She is wearing gloves, which is, we think, something of decor. However, she's very fancy and she has a very low-cut dress on and she looks boldly out at the viewer. And at this point in Renaissance Venice, ladies who wore gloves were courtesans. Also, take a look at those little rabbits back there. What do you think they're up to? Interesting. However, whoops, what about way up here? I can see a tower, which is usually connected to chastity. So who is this woman? How about this one? Here she is, the beautiful image of sacred. Sacred because she carries the sacred flame. Yet she's nude, so perhaps she is profane. She looks over at her sister. She's wearing this spectacular red cape over and just showing off her beautiful nudity. And she too, behind her, has some interesting animals and shepherds in the background having a good time. And way off in the distance is a church, which would represent sacred. So we're not really sure which one's sacred, which one's profane. Iconographically, it is confusing, but I think we can all agree that it's a perfect gift for a wedding. Don't those colors look beautiful? Thank you, Simon, for changing the cables. They look terrific, this beautiful projector. Okay, so our next category, unrequited love. And immediately, the ultimate story of unrequited love is Apollo and Daphne. And this beautiful sculpture is, of course, at the Villa Borghese in Rome. Yeah, it's downstairs from the Sacred and Profane Love. And here's the story. Eros, who is the naughty son of Venus, the goddess of love, he gets armed with arrows. He shot Apollo. Apollo's the god of music and poetry and art, we all know. And he shot him with a golden arrow, which means that the first person that Apollo lays eyes on, he's going to be completely and utterly in love with. But little did you not know that Cupid also carries arrows of lead. And if you're shot by a lead arrow, you have complete fear and disgust for whoever you lay eyes on. And of course, that's what happened to poor Daphne. Daphne is a river nymph, beautiful. And of course, Apollo falls madly in love with her. She wants nothing to do with him. She's filled with loathing and absolute fear. She gets hit by that arrow of love and the chase is on. He runs her down. He almost catches her. She flees again. She rejects him. He pleads. He cajoles. He begs, and she is filled with fear and disgust. until finally he wears her down, not understanding no means no. And she finally, as he's just getting his grip around her, she prays to her father, destroy this beauty that has injured me, or change the body that has destroyed my life. And before her prayer was even finished, her body began to harden. Thick bark closed around her chest. Have a look. Her hair became moving leaves, her fingers up to leaves. Her feet grow roots that fix her to the ground. Apollo placed his hand right on her belly. Bark grows up over it, and he can still feel her quivering bark. He grasps her arms, which were now branches, and declares that Daphne would be his tree, evergreen, ever young. And he takes those leaves and he places them on his head, and that's why Apollo, the god of poetry, laureate, laurel leaves. That's the connection. Daphne turns into a laurel tree. Here's another great image of that. Well, maybe it's not quite as great as I told you I was going to show you some that are quite well known and some that are not as well known. This one, I love this one. I mean, look at those crazy arms. She looks like a pom-pom girl. This is done by Antonio Piero del Polaiuolo, not sure which one. I've used this image before because it's one of the few images from the 15th century that actually shows the Arno River in the background, which is pretty interesting. But you see, as early as the late 15th century, they're interested in mythology. How do they find out about mythology and love in 15th century Florence? Think about it. Constantinople falls to the Turks in 1453. Where did the intelligentsia come? They came to Florence. Also, Florence hosted something called the Ecumenical Council in 1439, which meant that Greeks, there were like 700 Greeks that were coming to Florence with these ideas and translations of mythology. So this doesn't just happen out of nowhere. This love of mythology and these stories really come from something as early as the 15th century. Okay, let's do another. Now, speaking of mythology, let's do love and mythology. Okay, and without a doubt, get rid of the title. Here. The artist who melded myth and love most effectively was the great Titian. Here's a picture of Titian in his old age. This painting is of Venus and Adonis, and it was part of a series called Les Poésies, or the Poems. And it was all intended for this guy, whose name is Philip of Spain, who was only 26 years old at this time when he painted this, and he became the king. He would have been Charles V's son. And he was introduced to Titian by Charles V, and they got along very well, and he ordered up all these really sexy images that he could have in his rooms, known as the Poésies. What makes it even more interesting, however, is that he was 26 years old, but he was just married to this woman, whose name is Queen Mary, who was 37 years old. So a little over a decade older than her husband. And maybe the theme here of the wiser woman with that young man has something to do with the marriage of Philip and Queen Mary. Makes it even more interesting. Now, of course, the young king is going to love, he's hot-blooded, according to his description. He's going to love these visual poems. They appeal to him. And the painting shows, as you can all see, a very sensuous image of Venus. She's got this titillating expanse of flesh. Let's get in close, please. How beautiful. How beautiful is Titian creating this flesh and showing us to her from the back, twisting around towards, of course, Adonis. It's a vast expanse of female flesh, perfect for the prince. Now, what's going on here is that Venus is trying to stop Adonis from going off to the hunt. She too had been pricked by the arrows of Cupid. So there's Cupid, right where my cursor is. Cupid is sleeping, which is symbolic. It means that love has been made, and now Cupid is asleep. And Venus is shown trying to stop Adonis from taking off. I love this juxtaposition as well of this red velvet material underneath her beautiful backside. She has 1 foot down, 1 foot up in this very interesting pose of décolleté. Her brown hair is all tightly braided. Her body twists to the right as she's trying to grasp Adonis because she's mature. She realizes that he's impetuous, and of course he's going to go off, and later on the poor guy gets devoured by dogs. This is, in one way, you're thinking about this couple who has made love, and now Cupid rests. And I think what Titian's doing here, he's got this amazing capability of rendering the psychology to the story. He captures this moment that Adonis has this kind of sweet, innocent, a little bit confused gaze. You know, he looks like he's a young 19-year-old. He can't believe his luck. And certainly Venus, who's been pricked by the arrows, she feels maybe more for Adonis than he feels for her. So it's the kind of proverbial morning after. Loved, tinged with tragedy. That's a great work of art, Titian. Let's do some more mythology. Mythology is so much fun. And this actually is quite a disturbing work of art. Lots have been written on this recently. There was even an idea that they might, they put kind of a warning sign before you go in to look at this painting. It's at the Gardner, of course, in Boston, Cambridge. And it is it might be the greatest European painting in North America. It's called The Rape of Europa. And Titian doesn't shy away from a difficult theme. So it was part of this whole poesie for Philip II. So here's the story of Europa. She is a princess, and she lives on an island, and she's at the edge of the island. I'll get in close so you can see this. There she is. She's here, she's fooling around with her girlfriends. And they're playing around, there's a bunch of cows around, and Zeus sees from Mount Olympus Europa and falls completely in lust. And he transforms himself into a beautiful white bull. The girls play around with the bull. The bull was incredibly tame. And pretty soon Europa gets confidence with the bull, climbs up on the bull's back, and as soon as she does, wham, he takes off into the water, and she is completely helpless. Look at that image. She's clinging to the bull's horns just for balance, and she's crying out in terror. So the more you look at this, the more disturbing this becomes. What at first glance seems like a frivolous theme is actually quite serious. This bull has taken off with this young girl, and she's clinging. He takes her to Crete, where she is raped, and she ends up giving birth to Minos, who would be the stepfather of the Minotaur. Just getting our mythology straight. But essentially, this is a scene of violence, and I think Titian's not shying away from this. Violence, it's a horrifying image, but it's also beautifully painted. Look at her. The bull looks like he's smugly looking out at us. Look at all the quivering flesh, and the rendering of the water as well. If you come down to the bottom, you can see that Titian has placed in there, see the monsters at the bottom of the water. And she is in a complete panic. The figure that obviously catches our eye is the bull, who looks a little bit sheepishly out at us. He looks like he's innocent, but of course he is the protagonist. It's almost like Titian's got a sense of humor on this, but the scene is actually horrific because it's about sex and power and the human condition. Okay, so Rape of Europa. Now, we'll lighten it up a little bit. Lorenzo Lotto. This is Venus and Cupid. Lorenzo Lotto is a delightful painter that some people aren't familiar with. He was painting around the same time as Titian in Venice, but he can't quite compete with Titian. So he spends most of his career traveling around. He goes to the marches, he's in Bergamo, I think he's a fascinating painter, and he takes this popular subject of Venus and Cupid, and he really gives it a humorous twist, as you can see. So what's going on in the painting? We can see Venus, who is reclining. She's in some kind of like a bower, little set up hut somewhere in the outside. And she's, of course, with her son, who is peeing through a wreath of myrtle with an incense holder dangling below it. What's going on here? I mean, it is, even if you do know something about the culture of Venice at the time, this thing is difficult to interpret. And so therefore, the patron for this work of art must have been quite sophisticated. I actually don't know who commissioned this, but I'm sure must have been sophisticated and understand what this was all about. So it turns out, if you do the research, that this whole thing is a visual interpretation of a marriage poem that was oftentimes recited at weddings. Therefore, we believe it was a gift for a wedding. And in the poem, Venus is summoned to crown the bride with a myrtle wreath. Myrtle is symbolic of marital fidelity and also happiness. Then the chamber gets strewn with rose petals, ivy, and perfumed incense, as you can see. Can you see that incense? Let me get it a little closer for you. There it is. Look at how precisely Lotto has painted that. And that funny little Cupid peeing through it, if he's turned it into a game. And one of the most wonderful aspects of this painting is Lotto's attention to the detail. Look at the shell that hangs from Venus's head. What's going on there? Did you notice it? Right? And the shell represents, of course, fertility. Then let's look at some more of the details. You can see a band underneath her breast right here. Typically, a band represents fertility. That's what Roman brides wore once they got married. And of course, the peeing Cupid represents fertility. So it's all about fecundity, fertility, and the next generation. And I think it is playful and fun and a nice relief after the rape of Europa. Okay, now let's go to our next category, which is love and marriage. I always get that Frank Sinatra song in my head whenever I do. And I thought we'd do Lotto again. I like this artist. And it's a type of love, of course. This is by 16th century Venetian artist, as I said, and it belonged to the Cassotti family. The Cassotti family were from Bergamo, and they were wealthy textile merchants. And they were coming up the ranks, and they used their art to demonstrate their social aspirations, and this works beautifully. Again, they were cloth merchants, textile merchants. They were not noble, but they were loaded, and they managed to marry up. So what we see here is a marriage portrait commissioned by someone named Zanin Cassotti, who was the father of the young man that you see in the painting. And he really haggled with Lorenzo Lotto to paint this work, kind of giving you this idea of a businessman. So this was done in 1523 to commemorate his son's wedding to Faustina Assonica, who was a member of the patrician family in Bergamo. So it's meant to give, there's a lot to this. It's more than just a marriage portrait. It's meant to give a kind of visual evidence of Cassotti's social status, thanks to the fact that his son married into nobility. Okay, now let's do the symbolism. It's really rich in symbolism. You look at the importance placed on, let me get in close again. The importance on the jewels. Look at the silk clothing. Red. Red was the favorite color for Venetian brides. I can also see pearls here, which were an idea of purity and virginity. And here she is looking out at us with this beautiful headdress, as you can see. And at the very top, you see Cupid, who looks kind of smirky, doesn't he? Setting down this yoke on the back of the young couple. And from the yoke grows laurels, a symbol of virtue and a reference to fidelity amongst spouses. Then what's interesting as well is Lotto gives us The moment, it's the culmination of the ceremony, which is the giving of the rings. Here, I'll get in close again. This is the first time we see an exchange of rings in Renaissance art. Isn't that interesting? And she is reaching out. He's going to put it on her third finger on her left hand. Okay, why? Because it turns out they believed in the Renaissance that the third finger had a vein that led directly to the heart. And that's why wedding bands go on the third finger. She's dressed in red, as I said. Marsilio, the boy, the young man, he was already 28 years old when he got married, which is extremely young in the 16th century. She was only 17 years old, extremely young, 28. Usually men were already in their early 30s. And this might be more than just a marriage portrait. It might also be the father putting the yoke of adulthood on his 28-year-old son, finally getting out of the house away from mama. All right, now if you were going to choose a marriage portrait in Florence, which one would you choose? Of course. Yeah, so I couldn't help it. We had to put this in an easy lob, try to mix it up between works of art that are quite familiar and hopefully some works of art that most of you don't recognize. And this is the Duke and Duchess of Urbino. It's over at the Uffizi, the quintessential marriage portrait, even though it's really about love. It's about the love between a husband and a wife, and also it's about commemoration. And because she was dead when this thing was painted. That is Battista Sforza. And she died giving birth. She had a girl and a girl and a girl and a girl and another girl and another girl and a boy, and died in childbirth. Yeah, wow. So all those children, she died, and she looks kind of dead too, doesn't she, poor thing? So you can see, probably taken from a death mask. It was all the rage at the time to take warm wax on a famous person or respected person's face to get a look, and then put her in a cast so you could remember what she looked like. This is painted, of course, by Piero della Francesca, who was working in the court of Urbino. And it's full of interesting symbolism. So let's look at it together. You can see, I should have lined up the picture a little bit better. I apologize. There's a frame around it, but you can just see that the landscape links them together. Can you all see that? And then she's on the left, he's on the right. That's unusual. 99% of the time, the man is on the left and the woman is on the right. But he had lost his right ear and his right eye in a tournament. And according to his biographer, he had the bridge of his nose hacked out, so his left eye could see what was coming on the right. Now, I didn't make that up. That's the story. And therefore, he flips the side because that was not his good side, putting him over on the left-hand side. And it's interesting because he's shown here a little bit darker. I have a very high resolution image of him, so you can enjoy this. You see he's dark and he's swarthy. He's got wrinkles and warts and sort of wiry hair, this very bizarre, as you can see, profile. That strict profile is quite typical of portraits in the 15th century, supposed to remind you of a Roman emperor's coin. He's dressed in expensive red. He's dressed like a humanist. He was a great collector of art and books, and he turned this little village of Urbino into one of the great Renaissance courts. Here she is. Look at, he goes off on adventure. Look at the landscape. And Piero della Francesca is so skilled at showing us the reflection there of this boat. He goes off on adventure. And then we move to his wife's side, and you can see she stays home where she belongs. Right behind the walls. She actually ran the ship while he was off making the art of war. He was a mercenary general. She's wearing pearls again. Important. Think about how rare, friends, a pearl was in the 15th century. She also wears coral. Coral is symbolic of rebirth. Her hair is all done up in this elaborate coiffure, as you can see, with a veil, and she has the high fashion of plucking her hairline all the way back to mid-scalp. That's where the term highbrow comes from, by the way. So we have the Duke and Duchess of Urbino and the Cassotti marriage for. So of course, once you get married, what's going to go on? You want to have gifts for the bride, and just to show you some of the objects that these are really fun that celebrate love. Up at the top, I can see a wonderful image of this is going on in Florence underneath a loggia. It's supposed to celebrate the Rucellai wedding. Right in front of Palazzo Rucellai. You get an idea of what these ladies were dressed like. This is from the front of a hope chest. They too have all got their pluckers out, as you can see. I also love the outfits on these young men. They wear these very tight stockings that turn into shoes, pointed shoes that are called calzi. That's why the street Via Calzaioli, because it wasn't just stockings, it's stockings as well as the shoes. And you see their outfits, what's going, a little glimpse into Florence in the 15th century. And it would have been no doubt part of one of these marriage chests. The marriage chests were important, and they were actually bought by the husband's family, given to the new wife. And in there, she would put her linens, her jewelry. She was provided with this. And that's a very lovely cassone, but sometimes they get a little bit more risque. So in the front, you've got these images, but then sort of like a little peekaboo, you open up the top, and what do we find? Nude reclining figures. That's exciting for Valentine's Day. Here she is. That is a she. I mean, what a nice playful feel that is. You get an idea that, you know, things weren't that serious in the Renaissance. You open it up, and here's the nude figure. And then here, this is over, by the way, at the Horn Museum. If you've not been there, it's just reopened. I was just there last week with my class, or 2 weeks ago with my class. Here he is. He gets to wear underwear, but. And then, of course, this is at the National Gallery in London by Botticelli. Surely this was a cassone because of the shape of it and all kinds of wonderful symbolism going on. You can see that Mars is sleeping it off. He's thrown his head backwards. He won't even wake up when these little amorini, or these little cupids, are blowing their horns right in his ear. You can just hear him snoring. They're licking their chops and playing with this enormous lance, which obviously has phallic symbolism to it, and Venus is reclining. So these are the kind of gifts that you would give a new couple. And then you could get to gifts that are even more surprising. At first, they look just decorative. There's majolica. These would have been originally used to hold drugs for apothecaries or pharmacists. But if you look carefully, you can see there's a woman here lifting up her skirt with no underwear on. And sexual and these kind of fertility images appeared frequently on Renaissance objects. Or go over to these little amorous satyrs. Satyrs are known for their bestial side, and the one leg over another is supposed to indicate fertility. If that doesn't work, you can take a look at this penis head. That'll get you excited. Right here, have you noticed? This is a head. This was on display at the Uffizi. I guess it must have been about 4 years ago. It was really something else. It's a plate, and a big surprise because you see the head is all made up of many penises. Okay, so let's keep going. And here's another marriage portrait. Again, I just like the symbolism of this. You can see now we're in the 1490s. They're still in profile. This is a pendant meant to absolutely be seen together. You can see because the writing up at the top leads goes. It says, in order that our features will survive. And it was probably made to celebrate a marriage or a betrothal. And it's got lots of different allusions to love and matrimony. So he's holding a spray of flowers, see? They're known as pinks, held by the male sitter. And she's holding a quince held by the wife. And this is supposed to represent love and fertility. Then you can see in the deep background a pelican. Where's my pelican? Right down here where my cursor is. Let me get in close. And the pelican on the lower left side of the male portrait refers to charity and resurrection. See the pelican right where my cursor is? Can you make that out? Oh, sorry, it's right, excuse me. See him right there, right there. And it's pecking at its chest. So the pelican will make itself bleed to feed its young. And therefore you're sacrificing yourself for your children in the same way that the marriage does. You can also see on the lower right-hand side of the girl, you can see there are two rabbits very, very busy on the right-hand side, and a girl who is confronting a unicorn, connotating the end of virginity, because unicorns represent virginity. You know, that's not easy stuff, but remember, it's for a noble family, so they presumably would have known, in order that our features may survive. Okay, now let's go a little bit closer to home, literally close to home, because this is going on right around the corner. It's not a marriage portrait, but I wanted to show you great lovers. Two of the great lovers of the 16th century, very much in love with each other, and they eventually do end up getting married. And this is Bianca Capello, who was born in Venice to a noble family, and she was famous for her great beauty. At 15 years old, she ran away with a Florentine merchant, a clerk, and moved to Florence. And the Venetians were angry. They tried to get her arrested and dragged back home. But Duke Cosimo intervened. And we think it's because of her great beauty. Duke Cosimo's son, Francesco, caught sight of Bianca Capello, and he was completely enamored. Even though he was already married to Joanna of Austria, who he treated terribly, he showered Bianca with jewels and money, and eventually she did become his mistress. Then when Francesco became the Duke of Florence in 1575, he installed Bianca in a beautiful palace, which is just around the corner. So if you walked over to the beautiful Palazzo Capello, right down the street, it's the one with all the sgraffito on the outside. That's where she lived. Joanna of Austria died, it said, of a broken heart. These two did get married, and she was made crown duchess of Tuscany. The couple died just 1 year later, within 1 day of each other, presumably murdered with arsenic. And Francesco's brother, Ferdinando, takes over. Something's not adding up. Love, love. Although they were never married, I put this most delightful couple together. It's Raphael, the charming, good-looking. He's a bon vivant. He was a real ladies' man. He never married despite lots of outside pressure. Vasari tells us that he romanced many, many, many women. But the woman who really won his heart was a woman named Margherita Lutti. She was a daughter of a fornaio, or a baker, and she's forever known as La Fornarina, the baker's daughter. This is at the Galleria Nazionale in Rome. It's a beautiful image. Raphael falls for the baker's daughter over in the neighborhood of Trastevere. And you see Raphael giving us one of the most risque images of this woman from the 16th century. I mean, look at her. She's looking right out at us. Oversized eyes. She's got one hand to her breast. She's topless. And the other hand between her legs. Scandalous. And right here on her arm bracelet, it says Raphael Urbino. Okay, next category, familial love. Couples were expected to create a new family, and the arrival of a baby must have been both welcomed and feared. Think about it. I mean, children were the fulfillment. The Bible said, go forth and multiply, of course. They were a blessing for the wealthy, but for the poor, I always think of them as just one more mouth to feed. So the arrival of babies was celebrated, especially boys, but also girls, because girls could make connections between different families. But when you think about more than half the children died before they reached the age of 15, and many of them died before their first year, you really start to wonder how close parents could become to these poor children. So what kind of gifts do you give a family after the woman gave birth. These beautiful, they're called desco del partos. Partorire is the Italian word for to give birth. And this is the famous triumph of fame. This was the gift given to Lucrezia Tornabuoni when she gave birth to Lorenzo the Magnificent as a commemoration. And you would typically bring the plate to the mother as she was lying in, put cloth over it and bring her sweetmeats or something to sustain her. And later on, they turn it to something that she can hang in her bedroom. Here's another nice image of this. Choice of Hercules, again, right around 1500. They're moralizing usually, or some kind of mythology, or sometimes they love to show little naked boys. There was an idea that you were more likely to give birth to a male child if you gazed on male baby's genitals. It's a scientific fact. Or some of you will recognize this. This is over at the, you recognize that? That's over at the Palazzo Davanzati. Davanzati, if you've not been over there in the last 2 years, it's all been reorganized. It's really, really well done. And these little boys are having some kind of a game going on, pulling on each other's penises, which I don't know. Now, speaking of penises, if you were trying to get pregnant, things weren't going well, what do you do? All right, so you're not getting pregnant, you pray to the Virgin Mary, of course. Or maybe you go and you leave a votive offering at Santissima Annunziata, or you rub the foot of a miraculous image of the Virgin and Child, or you gaze at nude, little male babies, or you drink the right thing. If all else fails, what you can do is go to the penis tree. And here it is. Yes, this is in Massa Marittima. Later on, I want to know if anybody besides me has seen this penis tree, because it is really something else. A long time ago. It's worth the drive to Massa Marittima because you cannot believe your eyes. And the whole thing, the tree is being blooming forth with erect penises. And here down below, you can see these ladies down below who are shaking the trees. All right, I'll stop right there. It's supposed to be serious. Okay, that's the penis tree. You're never going to forget that one. And then I wanted to end the familial love with this. Got about 7 more minutes. This is Ghirlandaio. Isn't this a beautiful, beautiful painting? This is at the Louvre in Paris, of course. I always go, when I go to Paris, make a beeline to look at it. How do you paint love? And Ghirlandaio really does forth the beautiful young boy looking up at his presumably grandfather. They're probably nobility because of the outfits that they wear with the fur-lined red. And in the background, you can see Ghirlandaio's ability to show us one-point perspective. But he really doesn't pull back on the old man. I mean, you see him with his wart up here, he's balding, and this horrific-looking nose, of course, but the way that young boy looks up at his grandfather, he has absolutely no fear, no loathing. It's complete curiosity and love. That's familial love. All right, let's end with, or almost end with, this love for sale, just showing you a couple of images of prostitutes. These may be a prostitute that's still up for debate with art historians. John Ruskin believed that these two ladies were high-class courtesans, a polite term for prostitutes. And you can see, for example, they're waiting, supposedly waiting for their customers, and the page is over there bringing them a message from a lover from one of the brides. Those who do not accept that they're courtesans point out that most of the women, most women wore high. See the sandals here? Let me get in close. See the page right there? Right, little passarotta, that's going to be a symbol of sex. High heels, which is, of course, what courtesans would wear. You can see underneath their drapery, they'd be wearing high heels. So this may be an image of love for sale. Isn't that fabulous? This is a wonderful image from 1594. of a courtesan and her sister. She was the mistress of Henry IV in France, and they're both sitting in a bathtub. And she is holding a ring, presumably the ring that Henry IV gave her, and her sister sits nude beside her and reaches out and pinches her nipple. One interpretation is that this is announcing Gabriella's pregnancy. The nipple pinching gesture is often interpreted as an announcement that she's with child. It's kind of oddly affectionate, as we can see. And the ring, of course, he gave her as a token of his love. And she actually dies in childbirth with that child. Okay, next. Prostitute, in this case, a lady revealing her breast by Tintoretto. Her name is Veronica Franco, and she was a celebrated courtesan in Venice. She was the lover of the King of France, and here she is posed topless. It was scandalous. She was actually tried for witchcraft by the Spanish Inquisition, but she was acquitted. She had this wonderful literary salon in Venice, and she was known for her great music, and she also was quite generous. She supported many friends and family members. She edited books, and she is said to have once stated that about sex, "I wish it were not a sin to have liked it so much." Here's Martha. This is by Caravaggio. This is an image of Filide. She enjoyed a steady income. And this is Anna on the left-hand side. They probably didn't have a choice. There were famous prostitutes in Rome at the beginning of the 17th century. And Caravaggio was living on the edge and chose his presumably friends, his acquaintances, these two prostitutes, to represent Mary Magdalene and Martha and Mary in the house of Mary and Martha. So posing for Caravaggio may have given these girls a bit of a brief respite from their lives on the street. They were resigned to being prostitutes, Filide and Anna, and they will appear as sort of muses of Caravaggio through the rest of his career. Okay, so let me pull this together. I'm going to skip this one and go to homoerotic love. And this will be my last category, these last few minutes. And I wanted to show you the beautiful image here by Guido Reni of Saint Sebastian. And Saint Sebastian, he is our image of erotic or homoerotic love, and he has become a gay icon really over the centuries. So much so that you realize that Oscar Wilde took the alias Sebastian in his honor. And Tennessee Williams named a character Sebastian after him. Now, how did that transformation happen? Because lots of theories differ. Because Sebastian himself from the early Christian period was supposed to have been an older man who is killed by arrows. But later on, Sebastian becomes the saint that you pray to if you're sick, if you've got the bubonic plague or some kind of a pox because of the arrow wounds. And the idea is it's thought that begging or praying to an old sick man for good health was a bad idea. So the artist changed and transformed them to look healthy and vigorous. And as you can see, pretty hot, this image. And this was done just a couple of years. This was done in, let's see, 1619. Guido Reni dies in 1621. And they sent an underpants painter to come in and add just a little bit right along the edge of the loincloth because you could see too much of his genitals. So they have changed some of that. Oops. Okay. Now, homoerotic. Wonderful Caravaggio. This is supposed to be Cupid. Cupid is that beloved son of Venus. He gets himself in trouble carrying arrows of love, of course, but this time it's more than just Cupid, it's also a victorious victory of love. And here at the bottom, Caravaggio paints with great detail these objects of music and pleasure. Look, the armor has been cast down, set down. Instead, it's music and pleasure. And you can see this young Cupid figure who actually is clearly a street urchin that Caravaggio knew personally, probably a portrait of Mario Minetti, who was Caravaggio's friend, and he is way too old to be running around without any underpants on, as you can see. All right, last work, and then I'll end with this because I think it's one of the most beautiful images of love created in the Renaissance. And this is by Michelangelo. And it's a highly personal drawing of Zeus and Ganymede. He gave this to Tommaso Cavaliere, who was I think, the object of Michelangelo's greatest expression of love. Tommaso Cavaliere was 23 years old when he met Michelangelo. Michelangelo was 57. Cavaliere was Michelangelo's muse, his inspiration. He wrote him beautiful poetry, letters. They shared a mutual love for art. Some think that their relationship was Platonic, bringing it back to the beginning, and others suggest that it was much more. Zeus, the mythological character, lusted after Ganymede, the most beautiful of all human males. He turned himself into an eagle and raped the young man and brought him to Mount Olympus to serve him. Again, it's one of the sexiest works of art and done by Michelangelo, and I think extremely personal and beautiful for the art of love. And so with that, I hope you enjoyed this romp through different types of love and kind of an analysis of these different paintings that depict love in Renaissance art. Thank you.
All right, now we can see you. Okay, well, as always, we now can move to the question and answers. And the rules are the same as always. If you're in the room and you want to ask a question, make a comment, put your hand up and I'll bring you the microphone so that the people on the Zoom can hear. And Zoomers, you can talk to us through the chat. I will see there's already some comments. Or if you're feeling bold and brave, you can even unmute yourself and talk to us and we'll hear you in the room. So who would like to get it started? We've got one. Sorry, down in front here.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, really interesting.
That's it.
In the husband and wife portrait of the Duke and the Duchess, you had mentioned that the Duke was wearing clothing in the manner of humanists. I don't understand that. What does that mean?
So a humanist, somebody who was interested in literature and classical antiquity, they typically wore something called a berretto, that kind of red hat and the red outfit. You'll see Cosimo de' Medici do the same thing. You'll see the Gonzaga dressed like that. It's a pattern that these humanist men would wear. I didn't show you the reverse, which shows him actually in shining silver armor. So he's trying to show us two sides of the man of arms, because that's where his money came from, but where his heart was really humanism. Good question.
Why don't you read out the top there that's on the chart?
Hi, Elaine. On Sacred and Profane, could you talk about the images on the well they're sitting on as possible relevance? Yeah, so Gurpreet, that guy that was on the well was this centaur who was whipping someone. And that is why we think it might be a reference back to the Hypnerotomachia Polyphily, which is this publication, I think it was like 1496 or something, describing this whipping of the figures. It might be a quotation right from that.
Have we got one over there?
Thank you. The myths you mentioned come from Ovid's metamorphoses as well as Greek mythology, and I was wondering if you knew when that was translated into the vernacular rediscovered.
Right. Well, mythology, it's carried throughout classical antiquity because the monks wrote it down. And the monks carried the Ovid, I think they had Ovids throughout, of course, Roman antiquity and into the Middle Ages, because the monks were copying down manuscripts. And what were they copying? They were writing down, of course, the Bible, that makes sense, but treatises and recipe books, but also anything that was written, they were copying down. So it was never really lost. It just took a while for it to revive an interest. There's a good book Ross King wrote called The Bookseller of Florence. And he traces, it's a great book, I think he's given that presentation
yeah.
here, talking about the link between classical antiquity and how the people got a hold of those things. And then very importantly is that fall of Constantinople that I mentioned and the Ecumenical Council.
I'm just going to ask Sarah to put up the reminder to our Zoomers. We're delighted that you can join us, and we don't make you pay up front, but we do love it when you make your little donations to help us along as much as you feel comfortable with. Thank you. So Sarah will put that up in the comments. And for the next thoughtful question in the room, or indeed on the Zoom. Here we are.
In the beginning, you talked about Platonic love in reference to the lady who was the
Beatrice.
the surname, is it? No, the one that Botticelli referenced to in his other.
Oh, Simonetta Vespucci.
Thank you. And you said that because she was married, it must have been Platonic love, but I don't know whether that's a good. I don't know if that's a good enough reference to be Platonic love, because it could have been, yeah, she was married, but like, the guy could have been obsessed with her and like thought, oh, it's not Platonic love, because I love you for your body or for who you are or whatever. So I'm just wondering why it is agreed among everyone that it was more a form of friendship rather than an obsession with her.
So a friendship, or do you think that they were lovers?
No, but like not necessarily like lovers, because she was married, but like
Yeah.
on the part of the men in the city who are obsessed with her or like thought she was amazing. Why is that only Platonic love? Like, could there be a possibility that it is more of a
Friendship.
obsession or lust? Well, yeah, exactly. Rather than just pure Platonic.
I think the answer to that question is because of the poetry that was written in honor of her, and those letters back and forth, and what we read about specifically Giuliano and Lorenzo's opinion of her. But you're right. I mean, maybe the men in the streets were completely lusting after her, but all we have is the evidence that was written by Lorenzo and Giuliano.
These very well-educated, sophisticated Medici boys knew better than to do straight lust. Yeah. More thoughts or questions? Did anything come on the chat? Just a donation thing. Fabulous. Lots of fan mail. Livia Morgan says, fabulous lecture. Rosalind Lowe says, brilliant, Elaine. Patricia Thomas has seen the penis tree.
There'll be a field trip next week.
I think so. Yeah. And yes, so lots of fun. Okay, so I think unless there's any more burning thoughts, we've got some good wine from our seasoned partners from Basilica Carfaggio waiting for us in the other room. We drink good wine at the Institute these days because we have all these wonderful friends who help us to supply it. It's great. And it just remains for me to do the thank yous. Lynn Barton, thank you. Angel Academy, thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it. Thank you. But we would not be here this evening at all if it wasn't for Elaine. So thank you, Elaine, for another photo.
Thank you for having me.